Before we get into tonight's stories, I just want to take a few seconds to say thank you for being here. Unlike many horror channels, all the stories you hear on this channel are completely original, written by me. Nothing comes from Reddit, Google, or any third-party source, so every story is something new that you won't hear anywhere else. Keeping up with the writing is a lot of work, but seeing this community grow makes it completely worth it. So if you enjoy the stories and you're a fan of horror, please consider subscribing and joining us. It really helps the channel grow, and it would mean a lot to me. Now let's get into the stories. I don't think I've ever been prouder of myself than the day I became a qualified lifeguard. I know that probably sounds dramatic. It's not like I graduated med school or became a firefighter or anything. I didn't cure a disease. I didn't run into a burning building. I got a certificate, a whistle, and a red rescue tube. And for some reason, it felt like I had been handed the keys to the world. But if you grew up where I did, on the coast of California, the ocean is more than scenery. It's part of your life, whether you want it to be or not. It's where you learn to swim, where you spend your summers, where you have your first beer, your first kiss, your first sunburn so bad you sleep standing up. It's beautiful, but it doesn't care about you. That was something every local kid learned early. I grew up in a small town, not tiny enough that everyone knows your business, but small enough that they definitely know most of it. We're not Los Angeles. We're not San Diego. We're one of those places tourists drive into during the summer and say, "Oh, wow, this is cute," which is a nice way of saying there are 3 decent restaurants, 1 grocery store, a surf shop, and not much else. But in summer, the whole town changes. The beach fills up. Families come in with coolers and umbrellas. College kids rent Airbnbs and act like they invented drinking near water. Retired couples walk along the boardwalk in matching hats. And suddenly our little lifeguard team starts feeling like we're in Baywatch. Okay, maybe not exactly Baywatch. Nobody is running in slow motion. Half the time we're dealing with lost flip-flops, kids crying because sand got in their snacks, and tourists who think sunscreen is optional because they tan easily. But still, I loved it. I wouldn't change the job for anything. The work was rewarding. The weather was beautiful. The ocean was right there every day, blue and endless and alive. And the girls on the team. Well, it's not that kind of story. Let's just say lifeguards stay fit, swimsuits can be pretty figure-hugging, and we'll leave it there. Last summer, something happened that I still don't really know how to explain. It was the middle of July, which meant the beach was packed. The kind of packed where every patch of sand had towels, coolers, kids digging holes, dads pretending they knew how to throw footballs, and moms yelling, "Not too far!" every 30 seconds. I was posted at the main hut, standing up in the shade, scanning the water. That's the thing most people don't understand about lifeguarding. It looks like we're just hanging out. It looks easy, but you're watching constantly. You're tracking swimmers, currents, waves, kids drifting too far on inflatable rings, teenagers trying to impress each other, old guys swimming farther out than they should. Your eyes never stop moving. That day, the water had been weird. Not bad enough to close anything down, but choppy. There was a strong pull farther out, and the tide was doing something ugly near the rock pools on the north side of the beach. Those rock pools were popular with kids. At low tide, they looked harmless, even magical. Little shallow pools full of shells, crabs, seaweed, and tiny fish. Parents loved them because they looked safer than the ocean. They weren't. I was watching a family set up too close to the water line when a voice beside me said, "You enjoy this work?" I almost jumped. A man was standing next to the hut. I had no idea where he had come from. One second I was alone, and the next he was there, leaning casually like we'd been talking for 10 minutes. He looked odd. Not scary, exactly. Just out of place. He had long hair cut into a mullet kind of style, thick sideburns, and a handlebar mustache that looked like it belonged in an old photograph. He was tanned, lean, and wearing these ridiculously small, tight swim shorts. I mean, tiny. The kind of shorts no man under 70 should be allowed to wear without a permit. Honestly, he looked like he'd walked straight out of the 1970s. But fashion is weird now. Mullets are back. Mustaches are back. Short shorts are back. I figured maybe this guy had just jumped in with both feet and decided to make it his whole personality. "Yeah," I said. "I love it." He nodded, looking out toward the water. "You any good?" I laughed a little. "I hope so." "That's not what I asked." There was something about the way he said it that made me stop smiling. He wasn't being rude. He wasn't joking either. "I'm good," I said. He looked at me then. His eyes were pale, maybe blue or gray. Hard to tell in the sun. "Good," he said. "You'll need to be." Before I could ask what that meant, he lifted one hand and pointed toward the rock pools. "Looks a bit sketchy there." I turned. At first I didn't see it. There were 3 little girls playing near the pools, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Sisters, maybe friends. They had matching pink buckets and were crouched near one of the larger pools, laughing and scooping water. Their parents were a little way back under an umbrella, distracted by a baby. Then I saw the wave. It was coming in wrong. Anyone who's spent enough time near the ocean knows what I mean. Most waves break in a rhythm. You get used to them. But every now and then, one builds differently. Rolls in, heavier, faster, like something underneath it gave it a shove. This one was heading straight for the pools, and those girls had no idea. I didn't think. Training took over. I blew my emergency whistle so hard it hurt my mouth and sprinted. The beach turned chaotic around me. People looked up. Someone screamed. My feet hit hot sand, then wet sand, then slick rock. I could hear 2 of my colleagues behind me, responding before they even knew what they were responding to. The wave struck. White water exploded over the rocks. The 3 girls vanished. For one horrible second, I couldn't see them at all. Then one popped up, coughing and crying, being dragged sideways through the pool channel. I grabbed her arm and nearly slipped. Another lifeguard, Jenna, caught the second girl as she slammed against a rock. The third had been pulled farther, right into the surge. That's the one I still dream about. She was face down, her little pink shirt flashing in the foam. I jumped after her. The water smashed me against the rocks, hard enough that I felt skin tear off my shin. I caught her by the back of her shirt, then got an arm around her chest. She was so small. That's what I remember most. Not the noise, or the water, or the panic. Just how small she felt. Another wave sucked back, trying to take both of us. For half a second, I thought it was going to. Then hands grabbed me from behind. My colleague Marcus had my rescue tube. Jenna had the second girl. Together somehow, we got all 3 of them out. The parents reached us screaming. The girls were crying, coughing, terrified but alive. One had a cut on her forehead. One had swallowed a lot of water. The third, the one I'd grabbed, was shaking so badly, her teeth chattered even in the heat. But they were alive. It could have been awful. It should have been awful. For the next hour, everything was noise. Paramedics, police, parents crying, bystanders clapping, like we'd done some kind of performance. My supervisor asking for details. Me sitting on the back of an ambulance with a bandage around my shin, nodding like I was fine when I wasn't. Eventually, when things calmed down, I remembered the man. The guy with the mustache. The guy who had warned me. I walked back to the hut, expecting him to still be there. Maybe leaning against the rail, maybe waiting to say, "Good job." He wasn't. I looked around the beach. Nothing. I asked Jenna if she'd seen him. "What guy?" "The guy who pointed out the rock pools." She frowned. "I didn't see anyone with you." Marcus hadn't seen him either. Neither had my supervisor. That bothered me, but not as much as it should have. At the time, I told myself he just walked away. Maybe he didn't want attention. Maybe he was one of those old-school locals who hated being thanked. We have plenty of those. A week later, the town held a little ceremony for us. I know that sounds excessive, but small towns love ceremonies. Give them a rescue, a ribbon, and a mayor with a microphone, and they'll turn it into an event. They set it up outside town hall. There were folding chairs, a small crowd, local newspaper people, and a table with lemonade and cookies. The 3 girls were there with their parents. Seeing them standing there in little summer dresses, safe and alive, hit me harder than I expected. The mayor gave a speech about bravery and community and vigilance. He shook our hands one by one. When he got to me, he held on a little longer. "You did good, son," he said. "Those rock pools have always been a menace." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" I asked. He looked surprised, then sad. "You don't know?" I shook my head. He glanced toward the side of town hall. "Come with me." Behind the building was a small memorial garden. I'd seen it before, but never paid much attention. It had benches, flowers, little plaques, and sections dedicated to locals who had died in accidents over the years. The mayor led me to one stone wall, partly shaded by a cypress tree. At the top, engraved in metal, were the words, "Rock Pools." Beneath it were photos. 7 of them. 7 faces behind glass. Children. Teenagers. 1 older man. Underneath each was a name and year. My eyes moved along them slowly until they stopped. Mark Towns. The photo was faded, but it was him. Long hair, sideburns, handlebar mustache, that same lean face, that same almost amused expression. He was wearing a lifeguard shirt in the picture, open at the collar, looking like he had all the time in the world. My mouth went dry. The mayor noticed. "You okay?" I pointed at the photo. "Who was he?" "Mark." The mayor sighed. "Lifeguard here, back in the 70s. Local hero, depending on who you ask. Cocky as hell, apparently, but brave. He died pulling 2 kids out of those pools." I stared at the picture. "How?" "Big swell came in, same place as last week. He got the kids clear, but the current took him. They found him the next morning." The garden seemed suddenly too quiet. I could still hear his voice. "You any good?" "Good." You'll need to be. I didn't tell the mayor. What could I say? That a dead lifeguard in tiny shorts had appeared beside me and warned me just in time to save 3 girls? There's no way to say that without sounding like you need a long nap and maybe a brain scan. So I just stood there, looking at Mark Towns. And in that moment, I knew something with a certainty I can't explain. He hadn't come for me. He had come for them. Maybe he'd been watching those rock pools for almost 50 years. Maybe every summer, when the beach filled up and parents got distracted and kids wandered too close, Mark stood somewhere nobody noticed, waiting for the ocean to make another try. Maybe he couldn't stop the wave himself. Maybe all he could do was point. I still work that beach. I'm still proud to be a lifeguard. More proud now, actually. But I don't look at the job the same way anymore. Every time I pass the rock pools, I slow down. Every time the tide shifts, I watch them harder. And sometimes, when the sun is low and the beach is thinning out, I swear I see a man standing near the water. Long hair, sideburns, ridiculous shorts. Some of us love this job. It becomes who we are, forever. Sometimes. I'm 20 years old, and I don't know if it's the same in other countries. But if you're an American kid between about 8 and 15 years old, summer camp is practically a rite of passage. Some of my happiest memories came from those camps. I learned to kayak there, learned how to water ski, found out I had a curveball that could make grown counselors swear under their breath during baseball games. I even became obsessed with soccer, or real football, depending on who's reading this. Before camp, I barely knew what the sport was. After my first summer, I spent the rest of the year begging my parents to sign me up for a local team. Camp was freedom. No phones, no homework, no parents. Just cabins, campfires, lakes, forests, mosquito bites, and 700 kids convinced they were about to have the greatest summer of their lives. Now I'm 20. This August will be my 3rd year working as a counselor, and, realistically, probably my last. College is almost over. Internships are becoming a thing, and eventually you have to become one of those depressing adults that pays taxes and pretends to enjoy networking events. Working at camp completely changed how I saw the place. As a kid, you think everything just happens. The meals appear. The games get organized. The lake somehow stays safe. The cabins stay standing. Then you become staff and realize there are 50 exhausted counselors, cooks, maintenance workers, nurses, and administrators, somehow keeping 700 children alive inside what is basically an enormous patch of open forest. They work unbelievably hard. Every counselor gets wilderness training. Every camper gets head counts constantly. Radio check-ins every hour, restricted trails, emergency whistles, night patrols. They really do try. But here's the thing. You can put 50 adults in charge of 700 children. You still can't control several thousand acres of woodland. Last summer was the first and only time I've ever actually felt scared at camp. Not nervous, not uneasy, scared. It started with 2 11-year-old boys named Mike and Travis. If you've ever worked with kids, you know the type immediately. The explorers. Every group has them. They're the ones forever asking if they can check out that creek, wondering where the abandoned trail goes, finding animal bones, returning with pockets full of rocks that apparently look cool. If something weird exists within 3 miles of camp, those kids will find it. It was just before lights out. I was making sure everyone in Cedar Cabin had brushed their teeth and stopped throwing socks at each other when Mike knocked quietly on the counselor's door. He looked oddly serious. So, we found something. Travis stepped beside him, holding what looked like a stick wrapped in an old towel. Can we show you? I figured it'd be another deer skull or a rusty horseshoe. Instead, my stomach tightened. The thing looked like something straight out of Jeepers Creepers. It was about 2 feet long, a thick branch carved into a handle. The end had several razor-sharp rocks fixed into it with what looked like strips of old leather, intertwined with dried vines. The whole thing had then been coated in some thick black substance. Tar, maybe. Pitch. Tree resin. I don't know. Whatever it was had hardened into a glossy shell, holding the stone blades firmly in place. It looked ancient, primitive, like something a museum would display, or something someone still used. Where'd you get this? Near the tree line behind the kitchen, Mike answered. Half buried. You boys touch anything else? Both shook their heads. I forced a smile. Telling me was the right thing. Inside? Every instinct was screaming that something wasn't right. After the boys went to bed, I walked over to Jimmy's cabin. Jimmy was another counselor my age, level-headed, never panicked. He examined the weapon for nearly a minute. Yeah. That was all he said at first. Then, I don't like that. Neither did I. We debated telling management immediately. Instead, we decided to keep an eye on the area for a couple of days first. Maybe it belonged to some historical reenactor. Maybe some survivalist had made it. Maybe some idiot YouTuber. There had to be an explanation, right? 2 nights later, I was on kitchen watch, basically making sure no homesick campers wandered around after curfew looking for snacks. Around midnight, everything was dead quiet. The kitchen lights were off. The insects sounded deafening. Then, the back door opened, very slowly. Someone stepped outside. At first, I only saw a silhouette. Tall, broad, it moved strangely. Almost animal-like. The figure walked toward the woods. My flashlight was off. I froze. Then the moon came out from behind the clouds. For one impossible second, I genuinely thought I was looking at a buck walking on 2 legs. Huge antlers. Long face, animal body. My heart practically stopped. The figure turned. It wasn't a deer. It was a man. He'd skinned a buck. Not professionally. Not like taxidermy. I mean literally skinned the thing from head to tail and draped the entire hide over himself. The antlers sat above his own head. The deer's face hung over his like some grotesque hood. There were still dark stains across the hide. Old blood. Fresh blood. I couldn't tell. His own face looked filthy. Sunken cheeks, stringy beard, eyes that reflected the moonlight. He carried an old canvas sack bulging with food tins, beans, soup, fruit, probably stolen from the kitchen. Then he saw me. We stared at each other. Neither of us moved. He smiled. I wish he hadn't. His teeth were brown. Several were missing. The ones left looked stained with dried blood. Slowly, almost politely, he lifted one dirty finger to his lips. Shh, not threatening, not angry, just requesting silence. Then he turned and sprinted into the forest. I've never seen anyone run like that. He wasn't crashing through bushes. He flowed between trees. Within seconds, he'd vanished into darkness. I don't know how long I stood there. Eventually, Jimmy radioed, asking if everything was okay. Apparently, I'd missed 2 scheduled check-ins. I finally answered. My voice barely sounded like mine. Jimmy found me still staring at the woods. I told him everything, every detail. We reported it immediately. Management listened, took notes, asked questions, then nothing. They figured it was probably a homeless man, maybe someone living off-grid. Maybe he'd been scavenging leftovers for years. The local sheriff came out the next morning, walked around, found some footprints, found nothing else. That was pretty much the end of it, officially. Unofficially, counselors started whispering. Someone admitted food had occasionally gone missing over the years. One maintenance worker claimed he'd once seen smoke deep in the forest during winter. An older cook quietly mentioned hearing someone outside the kitchen several nights every summer. Nobody had ever actually seen him before. Or maybe nobody admitted they had. I couldn't stop thinking about that weapon Mike and Travis found. It wasn't homemade in someone's garage. It looked used, maintained, like a tool, not decoration. What really gets under my skin isn't that there was someone living in those woods. People disappear into forests all the time. It's that he clearly knew the camp. He knew exactly where the kitchen was. He knew when everyone was asleep. He knew which door wasn't alarmed. He knew how to move around without anyone noticing, which means he'd probably been watching us for a long time. Watching generations of campers. Watching me when I was a kid. Maybe watching every campfire, every canoe race, every talent show. Always just beyond the tree line. I'm heading back this August. I genuinely can't wait. Despite everything, I still love camp. There's nowhere else that feels quite like it. But I also know that every evening, when the sun drops behind those endless trees and the forest becomes one giant black wall, a thought will creep back into my head. Somewhere out there is a man who wears the skin of a deer. Somewhere out there is someone who knows the camp far better than any counselor ever could. Maybe he's harmless. Maybe he just steals canned food and wants to be left alone. I honestly hope that's all he is, because if that smile meant anything else, if that primitive weapon belonged to him, if those woods are really his home, then I have to wonder something that keeps me awake more than I'd like to admit. How long has he been living out there? And, more importantly, what else has been living with him? This is going to sound strange, but has anyone else had memories come back out of nowhere? I'm in my late 30s now, and I've started realizing that bad memories don't always stay buried because you've dealt with them. Sometimes they just hide. They sit somewhere in the back of your mind for years, even decades, and then one random day they come charging back, like they happened yesterday. That's what happened to me this week. It's summertime. The weather is perfect. Bright blue skies, not a cloud anywhere. Temperatures pushing into the high 80s. The kind of weather everyone waits all year for. Everyone at work has been talking about barbecues, beaches, swimming, taking the kids out. They all look genuinely excited. Me. I caught myself looking out of the office window, feeling uneasy. Not scared exactly, just uncomfortable. It took me a while to understand why. I've always told people I prefer autumn. Give me cold mornings, gray skies, and rain over blazing sunshine any day. I never really questioned it until 3 days ago. Now I think I know where it comes from. When I was a kid in the 90s, I loved summer just like everyone else. We weren't poor, exactly, but we definitely weren't well off. If it got hot enough that you wanted to cool off, there weren't many options. Either you hoped one of the richer kids invited everyone over because they had an actual swimming pool, or you went to the community pool. If you're younger, you might not remember them, but back then, they were everywhere. Huge outdoor public pools. Pay a couple of dollars to get in, pay by the hour. Lifeguards sat on impossibly high chairs, pretending to be Baywatch stars, while hundreds of kids splashed around with inflatable rings, beach balls, rubber sharks, and cheap goggles that leaked after 10 minutes. Looking back, they were wonderful. Families packed coolers. Teenagers flirted. Little kids screamed with excitement. Parents baked themselves on plastic loungers while pretending they were keeping an eye on everyone. On really hot days, they were absolutely packed. The best thing about them was that everyone was welcome. The worst thing about them was that everyone was welcome. Every town has oddballs. Every town has people that everyone quietly knows to avoid. Most of them are harmless. Some aren't. I remember the last day I ever went swimming. It was July 1999. I'd just turned 10. The place was absolutely heaving. There had to have been 300 people there. Kids jumping into the deep end. Toddlers screaming in the paddling pool. Teenagers bombing each other. Whistles constantly blowing. It was chaos, the good kind. I remember racing through the water pretending I was a shark. At one point, I wasn't paying attention, and I accidentally bumped into someone. Hard. I looked up expecting another kid. Instead, there was this older boy. He had to have been around 14, maybe 15. When you're 10, that feels like a grown man. He was huge, not just tall, broad, strong. He looked older than he should have. His hair was wet and hanging over his forehead. I remember his eyes most of all. There was something wrong deep behind them. Like he was angry at something nobody else could see. "What the hell?" he shouted. I froze. "I'm sorry," I blurted out. "I didn't mean to." For a second, I genuinely thought he was going to hit me. Then he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Just unexpected. "It's okay," he said. I remember feeling relieved. I started swimming away. Then I realized he was following me. Not aggressively, just following. He caught up after a minute. "You here with your parents?" "Yeah." "You want to hang out?" I shrugged. "Maybe." I didn't really know what else to say. Older kids talking to you was unusual. Part of me thought it was cool. Then he leaned closer. "I want to do something." "What?" "Something that'll get me on TV." I laughed awkwardly. I honestly thought he meant he'd do a huge dive or something stupid. "My favorite show's America's Most Wanted." I remember blinking. Cool. Then he looked over toward the little kiddie pool. There were dozens of toddlers playing. He smiled again. "I'm going to kill one of those little kids." Exactly like that. Matter of fact, no emotion, no grin, no laughter, just I'm gonna kill one of those little kids. I remember laughing nervously. Because what else do you do? People don't say things like that, especially not kids. He looked back at me. I'm serious. Then he stared at the toddlers again. I want to be famous. Even at 10 years old, something inside me knew this wasn't normal. Every instinct I had screamed at me to leave. I muttered something like, I have to find my mom. He didn't stop me, didn't grab me, didn't threaten me. He just watched me go. I found my mother sitting beside the pool reading a magazine. I nearly told her. I really did. I got as far as saying, Mom? She looked up. What is it? Then I looked around. I couldn't see him anymore. I convinced myself I'd misunderstood. Kids say weird things. Maybe he'd been joking. Maybe he wanted to scare me. Maybe. I didn't want to look stupid, so I just said, nothing. I wish I'd said something. God, I wish I'd said something. A couple of hours later, we were packing our things. My towel was wrapped around my shoulders. We were walking toward the exit. Then something instinctive made me look over towards the deep end of the pool. I saw that same teenager. He was staring through the crowds right into my eyes. He had this weird, cheeky smile on his face. He waved at me, one-handed. His other hand was below the water. Then I looked down. There was a little boy. Couldn't have been older than 4 or 5. I swear. I swear. The older boy had his hand pushing him underwater. The child wasn't splashing, wasn't laughing, just gone beneath the surface. I locked eyes with the older kid again. He was still smiling. Not wildly, not dramatically, just smiling. Then people moved between us. Someone jumped into the water. Some kids threw a big inflatable crocodile into the pool. Everything became confusion. My mom grabbed my shoulder. We're leaving. I remember trying to look back. I couldn't see anything. Just crowds, whistles, people shouting. That night my parents sat my brother and me down. Mom looked shaken. She told us a little boy had drowned at the pool. She explained how dangerous swimming could be. She talked about never running, never swimming alone, always listening to lifeguards. She said the newspapers were blaming poor supervision and unsafe facilities. Within weeks, the pool shut down. Eventually, weeds grew through the cracks in the parking lot. The place was demolished a few years later. Life moved on. I never saw that older boy again. Never learned his name. Never saw a photograph. Nothing. Over the years, I completely forgot about him. Or thought I had. Until this week. The memory came back so vividly, it actually made me feel sick. Here's the part that keeps bothering me. Maybe I'm remembering it wrong. Memory isn't perfect. Especially after nearly 30 years. Maybe he wasn't holding the child underwater. Maybe he was trying to help. Maybe someone else was responsible. Maybe the drowning really was just a tragic accident. But I can still see his face. I can still hear him saying he wanted to get on TV. I can still hear him talking about America's Most Wanted. And I can still remember that smile. I spent hours searching old newspaper archives online. The drowning happened. That much is real. July 1999. 4-year-old boy. Ruled accidental. No criminal investigation. No suspect. No mention of another teenager. Nothing. Which honestly makes me feel worse. Because if I'm right, then someone got away with murdering a child in broad daylight surrounded by hundreds of people. if I'm wrong. Then I've spent nearly 30 years carrying around a false memory that paints some random 14-year-old kid as a killer. I genuinely don't know which possibility is more disturbing. I know trauma can twist memories. I know children misunderstand things. But I also know what fear feels like. And I remember being terrified before anyone had drowned because of what he told me. So here I am, 37 years old, sitting in my house while everyone else celebrates another beautiful summer. The sun's shining through my windows. Kids are laughing somewhere outside. Someone's mowing their lawn. The neighborhood pool is probably packed. And all I can think about is a crowded community pool in July 1999, and a boy with wild eyes who wanted to be on television. Maybe I'm wrong. God, I hope I'm wrong. But every time the weather turns hot and the sky turns blue, I think some part of me remembers before the rest of me does. Maybe that's why I've hated summer all these years.